Hey there. Okay, so this one is the watercolor color wheel. And you all can see that I've already kind of started like my tints over here on this side and my shades over here on this side. So watercolor is different because not only do you have to learn how to mix your colors and your tints and your shades correctly, because normally you don't use white in watercolor all that much. A lot of the times you just kind of let the paper show through, you let it be really transparent. But I cannot give you a red and expect you to get a certain kind of pink ever without being able to have white. So that's why we're actually using white and black watercolor rather than just going straight ink. Okay, so the other thing that you have to fight or be aware of is water control and brush control. So when you are painting with watercolor, when you get two areas close together, and if you touch, one area will bleed into another. So for example, like I started on some shades over here, and this is my pure black, and here was my attempt at my next shade down. So as I was painting, you can see like I was trying really hard to stay like away, give myself a little bit of a line, so that's okay. Over here, I kind of let these dry each time before I worked, but here I was doing one right after the other. So I don't really care which way you do it. If you want to just keep doing one after the other and leave yourself a really thin line so they don't cross, then that's fine. Now, I was going through and darkening this one up, and my brush kind of slipped out of my hand and accidentally hit in here, which then created a wet area to wet area touch. So then the black watercolor from this value started to seep in to this, and then this was my attempt at trying to clean it up right then and there and hope that I can come back over, but you guys can see where it kind of bled in there. So I've got a mess up already. Now over here, this is a little too similar to this, so I need to kind of darken this up. So I need to go over. So I'm already kind of needing to make adjustments. So I think what I'm going to do while I'm demonstrating, I'm going to kind of continue with this technique and just leaving a really, really thin line of just blank paper to separate them so I can just keep working instead of having to wait for each one of them to dry. So I think I'm going to keep going with the shades, and then I'm going to come back over here with the tint. So because I need to go over this and then keep moving, and then once I get down into these little areas, kind of look and see and make sure that I'm on the right track. Also, while you're painting, and I'll be going over that with you, is we need to really look at hardcore brush control and how to control your washes, as in like your straight color, because this we'll just have to see if I need to go and adjust. So we're going to be doing a lot of like pooling control, picking that up with tissue and using paintbrushes to clean that up, and so on and so forth. Okay, so I've got my paint palette up here, and I guess I'll grab my freezer paper and put it, it's kind of curling up on me, which I guess I can just fold it a little bit more. So I guess I'll have my freezer paper here, and I guess I'm going to look at shades for right now, and I can kind of use these to kind of hold that down. So I'm going to do like all my mixing from here, and this is just storage. So if I need to give myself more, I'll do that. So tints and shades are just going to be in this video, and then I'm going to do a color one separately because I have to wait for these to dry before I can flip my my color wheel over. So that'll be a separate video. All right, so I'm just going to work through this. And I've got my tissue here, so you want to use tissue and not paper towel because watercolor is just so gentle. So I'm just going to pick up, I don't need very much black, even though I'm working in the shades. I mean, I can always add more and pick up more later, but we add a lot of water to these, so that's going to give us most of our like source paint that we're using from. So I did that, and then this white is pretty runny in its own, whereas some of the, okay, so it started to dry on me today, which that's fine. Your watercolor can dry on you. This one's kind of like dry to a paste almost, which that's okay. The watercolors can completely dry out and you can still activate them. Once acrylic dries, it's no longer usable. So I'll put the white there, and then I can go ahead and rehydrate that anyway. So I've been using this brush for like more control, and I think as I get smaller, like this brush is going to be too big for this space, so I'll probably use a smaller, like a much smaller brush, so I can control that a lot better. All right, so I already need to mix up my next shade here. So what's kind of difficult is that watercolor is transparent, and so you're going to have the effect of the paper coming through and having that affect the overall look of the tint or the shade. So like for this is supposed to be my darkest black, okay? And so for right now, that was like 2 coats of just straight black watercolor. This was the next shade down, but only 1 coat. So I'm trying to debate on whether I need to go back with a second coat. I'm almost feeling like I need to. I have an urge to put another coat here, but I think that's only because I'm so used to looking at acrylic paint and it being completely blacked in to where you can't see the paper. But watercolor, you're meant to see the paper through it. You're meant to see that transparency. So I think I'm going to try and block out that urge, and then, but maybe all of these subsequently have 2 layers to them. Like this tint over here, I know I need to get another layer on there because it is too similar to this. So this one needs to get darker than this one. So I have to put another layer. So sometimes you can achieve darker values just through the technique of layering, where you put down 1 layer of paint and then you let it dry and you come back with the same color and you put another layer on top. Another technique of that is called glazing, where you put 1 color down and then you would come and put another color on top, and then it changes that overall color. That's called glazing. So I'll be going over that more later. So I'm gonna find my water here. I'm trying to find, this one looks like it's my clean. You want to try, like with watercolor, you kind of want a rinse and clean your brush out water can, and then you want a clean water can at all time, because if you do that, then the water that you're pulling from stays clean and pure the whole time, so that your colors don't ever get muddy. For right now, I'm not really doing that, even though I should be, but okay. So first thing I'm going to do is, because my white is more of like a paste, I want to go ahead and start like kind of hydrating that up. So I'm just going to bring some water in and start rehydrating it, and hopefully making sure that that's actually going to work. And so I'm kind of mixing it here. It is, but I'm going to see, it's a little gray, so it's already kind of muddying up. It's not, that's not technically like a pure white like I need it to be, but okay. So just so my bristles don't soak up everything that I'm wanting, I just kind of finally decided to just drip some water onto that paste, and then now I'm getting my palette knife and just using that palette knife to squish that down in there so I have my color, or my white. Okay, and then I'm just gonna clean my palette knife off. Okay, now I'm gonna hydrate my black up a bit. So I guess I'm gonna go ahead and do kind of the same thing, where I'm just gonna pick up some water and drip it on there again, it should really be pure water. And then I'm going to take my palette knife and I can mix it like that. Again, I can add more water, but so you want to be careful for that, because the more water that you add to whatever pigment that you have, the more transparent it's going to be. So not only are you guys like working on intensity, which I talked about today. So intensity is the strength of pigment that's within a color. So like red versus yellow, red is much more intense. It's a lot stronger. So you need a lot more yellow to red when you're making orange, for example, which I'll do that in the second video. So you're not only dealing with that with watercolor, but you're also dealing with water amounts. So the more water you have per pigment, the more transparent it's going to be, so the lighter it's going to look, okay? Which again, watercolor, the purpose of it is to have that transparent look. That's the part of watercolor, okay? All right, so now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pick up this black here, and I'm kind of cheating, well, I'm just kind of squeezing that out. So maybe I can pick up some of this white with my palette knife and mix it like that. So I'm trying to get the next shade down. So I'm starting to get grays. And we're gonna see how that one goes. Like water to pigment ratio, it looks kind of fairly strong. So I'm just gonna try it and see what it looks like. So my goal is that I need it to be a step lighter. I can clean my palette knife off here. I need it to be a step lighter than this. So I'm gonna start it here. I'm gonna really work my brush control. I'm gonna try and keep that like thin white line. Well, actually, this one, it doesn't really matter. I can put it right up against because this is dry. Now, when I move on to this one, I will have to put a thin white line so I can keep these two separate. So I'm gonna keep working wet. So I'm gonna put this on here, wet to dry. So I'm not gonna wet this down first. I'm gonna just go straight at it. And then I'm gonna compare the two and then figure out where I need to correct, okay? So my brush is clean, and I'm also kind of dabbing the excess water off on a paper towel, and then I'm gonna put my brush in there and let it soak up that watercolor at the tip. And so now, just very carefully, I'm gonna start spreading that watercolor through this whole shape. And so what I wanna do is, I'm really just trying to control this brush and where the water or this color is going to pool. So you guys can see like where it starts to kind of pool here, which gives it a darker appearance. So right now, before I go and pick up any new pigment, I'm just trying to spread out what I already have, which is called a full wash. So a full wash is where you cover one area as evenly as you possibly can with your color. Okay, so here's where your tissue starts coming into play, because also when we do watercolor paintings, we'll be taping them down so that we won't have like this weird pooling. But here's where there's two different types of way that you can blot. You can clean your brush off and dry it off, and then kind of with your dry bristles, you can go into the areas where there's pooling and just do very gentle tapping with your paintbrush, and it's gonna start lifting. That's what the actual term is called, lifting, not blotting. You can start lifting with your paintbrush, and that's actually working really well, and to get an even coat. Now, let me go ahead and show you some like purposeful like pooling, and then how you can use your tissue for that. So here I'm kind of coming in with a second layer. Okay, so here I've got like some purposeful pooling. So now I can take my tissue and just use it almost just like I just did with my brush. So just kind of very gently touching it to the surface to get it nice and even. Okay, so judging wise, I mean, this is kind of looking a little darker than this. So I might be able to do one of two things. I can go over this with another layer, which that's kind of how I feel like I want to go, or I can put a layer of water down on here and blot and try to make it just a touch lighter, but that's me kind of cheating and using water instead of actually getting the right value. So I'm going to take this, what I had, and pick up some more black, but I picked up way too much. So I'm just going to put a little bit over here. Well, I'm going to go ahead and mix it like that. I'm going to add water. I want it to be a bit more transparent. Okay, so now I made that darker, and I'm going to go ahead and kind of line it up next to that 10 now. And I'm going to go over this. Now what I have to do is, since I just did this one and I put it up against that line, I have to keep them separate. So I'm just trying to stay away. I'm just really controlling my brush and just making sure that I'm keeping a really thin line between this shade and the shade that I just did. And here I can go all the way and actually touch the black now. So I'm not, like I said, I don't really care how you do it. If you want to keep like a thin white line between all of them, that's fine. Okay, so now I'm going to kind of control the blotting. So I dried off my brush a little bit, and I'm going to fix those areas that were pooling. Okay, that to me seems better. Like I can definitely see that it's like dark, a little bit lighter, a little bit lighter. Okay, so now I'm just going to keep going. But what I'm going to do is, since I had this shade for here, but then I wanted to make it darker, I added more black. Well, now I need to make it lighter, but I'm going to half that so that I don't have to mix as much paint in one. Okay, so I'm just going to mix like from that one now. So I'm going to grab some more white, as much as I can. It's kind of tough picking up white with a palette knife, but okay. So this gray should be kind of back where I was for here. So I'm going to make sure that my palette knife is clean, and then I'm going to pick up another little dab of white. And I might have went a little too far. That must have, I think that was a little too much. Okay, so I kind of want something that's in between this and this. So with that being said, I'm going to pick up some of this. And clean that off, and then I'm going to pick up some of this. Pick up a little more. And go that route. And then we're going to see. Okay, so I kind of wetted my brush down because this isn't a whole lot to work with. And then I'm going to go for it. and then I can judge. Now these grays are kind of starting to look like the ones over here. So I might need to just get darker in total. Because now I'm starting to look across the pond here, across the wheel, and this is very similar to that. And those are in my tints. So that's probably not gonna work, and I'm probably gonna have to bump up all of them then, which is fine. So I'll just go ahead and start doing that now. So I'll just pick up black. And just go straight in. Now I know I talked about how I wanted to resist this urge in making it look really opaque, but I've got to kick up my values for this scale to be visually correct. Okay, so really working this, but like really controlling this brush, because wherever that water line stops is where that color is going to stop. So I can actually exert a lot of control on where I want my colors to go just by slowing down and using my brush to its full capacity. Okay, so now that I'm kind of working wet on wet again, when I come back into here, it's kind of drying out. It's got some pooling area issues. So when I come back and I mix this one, like I have to leave a little bit of a line so it doesn't go into there. Okay, so we kind of got a lot of different, let's see if I can kind of bring them all together. Okay, so here's black. So if this is my 10, now I want to kind of shoot for a 9. So that means it would be black with just a little bit of white added to it. So it's just barely off black. Now if I do this good, then I can just keep mixing from here. So let me pick up some of that white. And here I'm going to try and follow my own rule of thumb and pick up just a little bit to start. That was, I don't know, that might be too much. Maybe not. We'll see. We'll try it out. Okay, so I just kind of wetted my brush down. And I'm going to pick up this value. And I'm going to go ahead and paint on top. So I'm also adjusting my values for them to be darker, but now I'm also working out kind of like multi layers as well. Okay, at first I thought maybe that was going to be a little too dark, but maybe not. So I'm going to use kind of that lifting technique where I kind of dry my brush out and go back on top. Okay. All right, so now I'm going to adjust and then adjust. So now I want to pick up some more white. I'm going to do just a little bit. Add that in. I think I'm going to do just a tiny bit more. And when I say tiny, I really mean tiny. I can probably pick that back up. I think I did too much. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe not. I keep saying that and then I'm kind of fine with what it looks like. Okay, so now that one, yeah, might be a little too many steps. It's pretty gray when it should be a bit more black. So can adjust that, add a little bit more water. Okay, slowing down when I get to the edges. That one I've got some pretty significant pooling in there because my paper has a crease or like a ripple in there. So this, when it like really pools like that, like you've got a little swimming pool in there, I suggest go straight to your tissue. So you're just kind of blotting that up. And then I was kind of trying to keep these separate. I might be able to. Okay, that looks better. Yeah, I think I'm starting to get the hang of it now. So sometimes it just takes a little while to get back into the swing of it. Okay. That looks pretty good. Let's try that. See how that looks in comparison. Not bad. So the other difficult part with watercolor is that you can always go darker, but you cannot go lighter. So like for my tints, I tried to be really careful and just make them barely visible because you can adjust your dark. You can go darker, but you can't go lighter. So like I cannot adjust my #1 tint over there to make it be any lighter than it already is. I can only make it darker and I don't want to do that. So maybe starting with shades is going to be easier than starting with tints because you can adjust and go darker. Now if I keep looking at my gradual work here, this is looking a little too light, like in comparison to this, that's compared to that. So I think I can kind of come up and pick some of the black watercolor, mix it into what I had here, and then go over and see if that is a closer fit. Which I think it is. So I've got a lot of pooling that I need to fix. So I dried off my brush and now I'm just tap, 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 tap to kind of clean it up. And see, that's what happens if you put just straight water in there. You get kind of, let's call these like blooms. That's called like a wet on wet. Okay. All right, so I think you guys get the hang of it, of what I'm trying to say. I'll continue this out and then once this dries, I'll start on a color one for you, okay?